Hello, welcome to my bookshelf, and today I wanted to share with you all the books that I hope to read in the month of March. Now, I know that I have a lot of books on my TBR, 12 to be exact, though admittedly half of them are audiobooks and half of them are physical books, so not as ambitious as that sounds. So let's start with the audiobooks, the first of which is actually one that I technically already started, but only just barely, and that is Winter by Marissa Meyer. And if you don't know, this is the last book in the Lunar Chronicles series. Basically, they're fairy tale retellings, but they're science fiction, and honestly, what I like about this is that there's a focus of different fairy tales throughout the series, so each book in the series is dedicated specifically to a different fairy tale character. We have Cinderella, Red Riding Hood, Rapunzel, and now Snow White. And they all end up, meeting each other and interacting with each other and having their own storylines, but also this just like uniting story that's unique, that isn't necessarily part of one specific fairy tale. So it takes some of the old, but it also does its own thing, which I think is really cool. And like I said, it's also science fiction, it's set in the future. I think it's a lot of fun. So I'm really excited, but also kind of nervous to see the ending of this series because endings are really hard to land. And so we'll see how this one does. I shall also note that there is this companion book called The Stars Above that goes with this series that I'll most likely also be reading, but it's fairly short from my understanding, so it's not like a full-length book, so I'm not counting that in my total of 12 books, but I'll probably be reading it this month. Alright, so the next book on my TBR is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, and I am super excited about this book. I feel like everyone who's talked about this book just raves about it. They seem to just love it. And honestly, I don't know a whole lot about the specific plot, but I was told that it's a psychological thriller. It's like mysterious and strange and weird, mind-bending. All those adjectives just sound right up my alley, and I'm super excited for it. And like I said, it has great reviews from a lot of people on BookTube, and I trust their opinions, so I am hoping that this will indeed be a fantastic read. So I don't have anything else to say about it, I'm just really excited. The next book on my TBR is kind of a memoir, but not really, and that is The Princess Diarist by Carrie Fisher, the late and great Carrie Fisher, I should say. And this is like a microcosm, I guess, of like a memoir, because memoirs are normally like looking back at your whole life. And this is obviously just one specific portion of her life, which is the making of the Star Wars movies, which is obviously what she's the most known for. So I'm very excited about this. I love Carrie Fisher. She's just so honest and blunt. She is just authentic to who she is. And also, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so I thought this was a great introduction to her work because I know that she's written other books. I think her other books delve more into her struggles with bipolar, and I think also with drugs and alcohol, just like other issues in her life. But this one I think is really just focusing on Star Wars, so like I said, I thought it would be a great introduction to her writing. Alright, the next book on my TBR I am excited but nervous about as well, and that is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. Now, I'm excited because everyone seems to love this series. I'm a bit nervous just because it is fantasy, and fantasy is definitely something I've been nervous about reading more of, just because I feel like fantasy can be kind of daunting, because you have to take in this whole new world. It's just, it requires more of the reader. It really, really does. I've heard great things about this series specifically, but also V.E. Schwab. All of her books sound super interesting. This one does too. I know almost nothing about it, but what I do know about it is that there's like parallel Londons in this universe, and there's different levels of magic use, I think. So I think in one version of London, which I would assume be ours, would be like we don't have magic or we have very little magic. And then there's other Londons and like parallel universes, if you will, that do have magic. So more and more people have magic in these different Londons. That's my understanding of it. I think that's a really cool concept. I don't know anything else about it, but again, I've heard really good things about it, so I'm gonna go off of their word and trust them that this is a good series. So I am, like I said, a little apprehensive, but excited about that. The next book on my TBR I'm also apprehensive about, but for a different reason. So the next book is The Circle by Dave Eggers, and I'm apprehensive because I've seen the movie. And I should clarify, I didn't hate the movie. Actually, on a lot of levels, I really did like the movie, but it didn't really work as a movie. Like, it felt like a lot of different vignettes that were like slammed together with the same characters. So it just didn't have that like cohesion, and like, I don't know, it just didn't fully work for whatever reason as a movie for me. But it had so many really interesting ideas in it. And if you don't know, The Circle, we follow this main character who just gets hired at this company that's this great tech company, which is more or less like a mixture of like Google and Apple and all the really big technological companies nowadays. And it's kind of like all rolled into one, and there's a lot of things that we already have that this technology company has out, but they also have some advancements that we today don't have yet. So this is science fiction. So there's a lot of really interesting ideas in here, and obviously really important ideas for our time period. So I'm apprehensive, but also excited, because a lot of times when there's an adaptation, there's something about making an adaptation that they have a hard time doing, and maybe they didn't fully capture the amazingness of this book. I don't really know. I haven't heard anything about this book, so I don't know how faithful of an adaptation that was. It's kind of a big question mark, but I love science fiction, and so I'm definitely intrigued to see what this book is actually like. And the next book on my TBR is All the Things I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. I've heard great things about this author, and so I'm very excited to finally read some of their work. And also, it has an interesting premise, but also an important premise. Like, I think this is one of those books that hits close to home for a lot of people, and so it has like real life issues in it that I think are obviously always important to talk about. So what I know of this book is that it follows a Chinese American family in the 1970s. So I guess technically it's historical fiction, though admittedly the 70s wasn't all that long ago in the grand scheme of things. And it's set in Ohio, which is kind of cool because that's where I'm currently living, so that's exciting. And I guess, unfortunately, this family suffers a tragedy of some sort. And ultimately, it seems like this book is about how the family deals with the tragedy, whether that brings them closer together or pulls them apart. So I'm definitely intrigued by this book. I'm not sure exactly what direction this is going to go in completely, but I always like going into books kind of blind. So I'm pretty excited about this one as well. Okay, so the next 6 books on my TBR are physical books, so I actually own them. So the first 3 books have some kind of March-related theme, and some of them are really kind of just barely a part of this theme I'm making, but it is what it is. So the first of which is like the most obvious, because March, of course, is St. Patrick's Day, and so we want to celebrate the Irish culture, though admittedly this book might be kind of a weird way to celebrate the Irish culture, because we're going to talk about murder, most Irish. But I'm excited to read this book because I think all the stories are set in Ireland. But either way, I'm Irish. I love the Irish culture. I'm very excited to read this book. I've had it for a while, and I love murder mysteries, and I'm assuming that that's what this book is about, considering the title. I should also clarify that this is an anthology series, so they're short stories from different authors, all compiled into one edition, and there's usually a theme that somehow fits them all together. I don't really know any of these authors, but again, I think it's always fun to read from authors you don't know. So I'm excited for this, and I really haven't read many anthologies, so I'm also excited for that. So we'll see. The next book on my TBR is from an Irish author, so there's my loose thread there, and that would be Artemis Fowl, The Arctic Incident by Ian Colfer. I think the book is normally set in Ireland because this is a book series, and I think our titular character is from Ireland as well. But, I have a sneaking suspicion that this specific book in this series is not going to be taking place in Ireland because it's not very Arctic. But this is the second book in the Artemis Fowl series, and I don't know the specifics about this book, but Artemis Fowl in general. Artemis, the titular character, he's 12 years old, but he's a criminal mastermind, and he's rich and super smart. And he finds out about the existence of magical creatures, and he exploits this knowledge to get money. So he is definitely an anti-hero, but yet he's our protagonist, which is really cool, especially for a book aimed at younger audiences. It's kind of interesting. So we'll see. This is his next adventure, and yeah, that's all I know about this one. Okay, the next book on my TBR has a different kind of March theme. So March also has Pi Day, which is, March 14th for 3.14, the number pi. And so I thought, what does math help us do? The answer to that is science, along with like lots of other things, right? But science, right? So this book is very fitting because it is a nonfiction science-related book. And that is The Best American Science Writing 2010. Now this is a collection of different, I don't know if you would call them articles, but just like scientific writing, all compiled into one volume. So it's like a nonfiction anthology, more or less, which is kind of cool. And honestly, and there's different, well, you can see when I got it. It was a while ago. Let's see here. So there's lots of different stories in here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but here are some of the titles of the writings in here, so you get some of an idea like what some of the topics are. So we have the placebo problem. We have the truth about grit. We have friendship as a health factor. We have test subjects who call the scientist mom or dad. We have an epidemic of fear. We have the missions of astronomy. We have decoding an ancient computer. And so much more. So I'm really excited. These topics sound really interesting, and I also want to, starting this month, but I think just in general, I want to read more books that teach me something explicitly. I think that you can learn things from literally any kind of book, but I love books that also are like explicitly trying to, teach you something or tell you something. And so I want to read more nonfiction, and I want to learn more from my books as well. So I'm trying to balance out like the fun reading and also the educational reading. So this is one of those books, so I'm excited to have this on my TBR, have something a little different. So if you've watched my most recent book haul, you'll have seen this next book in my TBR because I unboxed it, because I just started subscribing to the Book of the Month box. And so it's a really cool subscription box. You can watch that video if you want to know more information about it. But my pick for Book of the Month is An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. And so I'm very excited to finally read my first ever Book of the Month. This has like amazing reviews, like 4.5 or something. It was pretty high. I just keep seeing this book everywhere. And Oprah picked it for a book club. Like, it seems to be very popular. It's literary fiction, which I'm assuming is just like a book that talks more about like real life social issues that are obviously really important to talk about and discuss. I really don't know the details of the plot because everything I was reading, it was saying not to know a whole lot about this book going into it. It's more about the journey and the experience that these characters go through in their marriage. So, I mean, I'm just going to spitball and say that, they have to deal with obstacles in their life and in their marriage, hopefully together, but maybe they're heading for divorce. I don't know, but I just thought that this was a really interesting book and also a really important book and a book with a gorgeous cover. And yeah, so I'm definitely excited, a little nervous just because I'm assuming that it's going to be kind of depressing because it's going to deal with, struggles and, just family life and, sometimes you want to escape from that, but sometimes it's important to look at that too. So I am definitely excited to see what all the hype is about, and hopefully it's not too depressing. Okay, the last two books on my TBR are both nonfiction, but they're very different from each other. This next one actually has so many similarities to another book on my TBR, which I did not realize when I was picking my TBR. It is just weird. So we have As You Wish, Inconceivable Tales from the Making of the Princess Bride by Carrie Elwes. Now, this book is actor Carrie Elwes's, not a memoir. This is more like, again, his stories about making The Princess Bride. So it's a book about making a movie, which sounds eerily familiar to The Princess Diaries, now doesn't it? And also, let me point out that the titles both involve princess in them. Like, I think that is just so bizarre. And also, just icing on the cake, they're both written by someone named Carrie. Like, what? What are the odds of that? Like, it's just so weird. And also, both covers have them, like, looking as their character in the movie. It just gets weird. That all aside, I also really enjoy Carrie Elwes. He seems to be just like a genuinely good guy, and honestly, I love The Princess Bride, so I'm very excited to find out more about the making of it. Alright, and now we've come to the last book of my TBR, which I do realize is not going to be a book for everyone, but again, not all books are for everyone, so it just kind of goes without saying. This is a spiritual book, which, you know, again, I realize eliminates some people, like some people don't want to read that kind of thing, and I totally understand. But anyway, because Lent started last month, it's kind of invigorated this need for me to actually read my spiritual books, which I own. I mean, I'm staring at this huge bookshelf right now that is full of books that, you know, fit this description that I've just been ignoring for so very long, and I think now it's time to actually like include them on my TBRs. So I'm going to try to have at least one spiritual book every single month to read on my TBR. So I'm going to finally read some more of my books, some more variety of different kinds of books, so it's not all just fiction. So I'm gonna try to balance out fiction and nonfiction a little bit more. So this one is The Love Languages of God by Gary Chapman. And this might sound vaguely familiar just because Gary Chapman wrote these books called The 5 Love Languages, which he talks about the different ways of both giving and receiving love. In the original book, it's like to your either spouse or partner, or whoever you're in a relationship with. The focus of that first book, or that original book I should say, is on a romantic relationship. But after the success of that book, he has written many other books about different kinds of relationships and how the love languages play into those relationships. Because ultimately, it applies to everyone, whether you're in a romantic relationship or not. There is a lot that can be learned from understanding how the person that you're trying to show that you care about, that you love them, and that you care about them. A lot of times there's miscommunication, not only just verbally, but also in how we're showing our affection for each other, whether it's romantic or not. I definitely would recommend at least the original book. Though this book, I'm not sure exactly how this is going to work because obviously the other books involve like 2 human relationships. And this one obviously is going to involve a relationship between a human and a deity, which is inherently different. So I'm very curious to see how this plays out, like the love languages play out in this relationship and how he ties that all in there. So I'm very excited about that. All right, there you have it. All 12 books, 13 if you're counting The Stars Above, on my TBR for the month of March, which I realize sounds crazy, but you know, I feel like it shouldn't be too bad. I feel like I'm getting the hang of reading on a regular basis, and I do honestly feel like I'm reading just more often. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. And so I'm pretty confident that I can at least read most of these books. But I am going to need some luck. So please wish me some luck on this. Some good old Irish luck, actually. That's very fitting. As always, I just want to thank you guys so much for watching this video, and until next time.